Hi everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to Transformation Tuesday. This is Cecile with Get Mental Podcast. I just wanted to, wish everybody a great Tuesday. Hopefully you guys are, like I always say, hanging in there, staying strong and positive. We have a very important campaign happening at Get Mental in the next couple of weeks. And we are calling it the We Are the World campaign. And it is basically dedicated to honoring and educating the public, honoring our first responders and our essential workers and advocating for them, and also educating the public on the real toll on their mental health that this crisis is taking. So as you all know, we're all impacted already as it is, right? Like our mental health, whether we like it or not, is going to be and already has been impacted by all the changes that have gone on in the last, 8-9 weeks, right? On our state of well-being, our sense of security and safety in the world. For those with pre-existing conditions, the symptoms or your quality of life may have worsened. So I don't need to tell you guys how it's impacted all of us, but I believe that first responders are not maybe getting as much limelight or attention maybe as they really deserve. Okay, so just to give you guys a context, the United Nations, and I'm going to be reading because there's a lot of notes. It's a lot of information to give you guys in a short period of time, so please be patient with me. The United Nations is warning us of a global mental health crisis. Okay, so not just a domestic national issue. This is a global mental health crisis, and the World Health Organization also seemed to agree. And usually these people get it right for the most part, regardless of how you feel about the current politics between the WHO and China and the US, right? So and I'm seeing this on the ground as well, okay? Because the people I'm supporting, and I'm just one person and we're just one practice, but the people we're supporting are just a lot more stressed. And there's been a few studies already, like in Canada, China, and UK, showing the increase in numbers of people with especially healthcare workers reporting increase in the rates of depression, insomnia, and I think anxiety, which makes sense when you think about it, right? And then there's also another study in the UK showing that youth with pre-existing mental health conditions have reported a worsening of their mental health conditions. So these are just, kind of the landscape. These are just the little iceberg that I'm sharing with you guys. I mean, this thing is huge and deep. So we wanted to dedicate a whole campaign just on first responders, just to, we need them. We need to help them get through this because they are on the front line. And first of all, when we say first responders, we're not just talking about healthcare workers, but they are a huge component to this, right? We're also talking about law enforcement, military personnel. Then we're also talking about essential workers like grocers, gas attendants, bank tellers. Everything that the government has deemed essential. That means people have to show up to work whether they like it or not, whether they agree with it or not. So everybody who is first line and essential is basically putting themselves at risk every time. Okay? And I know there's debate about, especially in the US, about, maybe we've flattened the curve, we should all go back to normal life. Fine, that's not what this talk is about. This is really about honoring the risk and the sacrifice that they are doing. This is our version of a war, basically, right? And there's no playbook. So, in a way, we're fighting the invisible enemy. I imagine this is what soldiers or military servicemen and women would feel when they're literally in a war, right? And trying to navigate a war zone and having to constantly be hyper vigilant. So the exception is that they've been trained to fight a war. We've never been in this situation before. We're all learning as we go, and it is constantly evolving. So I just wanted to give you guys a context for that, okay? I want to talk first about the bright side. The bright side. Sorry, the dark side, okay? Then we're going to finish it off by talking about the bright side. Because I believe there is always a bright side in a crisis. And it's just how we are as human beings. We always, some of us just like rise to the occasion. So anyway, let's talk about the dark side, okay? One page gone. A couple more to go. So frontline workers and essential workers, are dealing with high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety, right? There's enormous pressure and responsibility that they typically are carrying, especially nurses and doctors. There's a lot of fear of contamination, fear of contaminating loved ones, fear of contaminating other people. Flight attendants too, by the way, are, the ones that are still flying. They are also, at great risk. The constant hypervigilance, meaning constant screening your environment, constantly thinking about, am I safe? Am I not safe? Do I have my mask? Where's my mask? Where's my gloves? Did I wash my hands? Did I touch my face? I mean, just put yourself a day in the life, one day in the life of a healthcare worker, a frontline worker, or an essential worker, and imagine what that's like for one day, okay? And then multiply that to 8-9 weeks. And then on top of that, to the fact that we don't know when this is all going to be, when it is all going to stabilize, right? So I want you guys to just put yourself for a minute in their shoes and see, so you can have a little bit more empathy, right? If this is something that, you're not really fully understanding, how stressful of a situation this is, or this can be for them on a daily basis. In addition to that, some of our first responders have to deal with, or are confronted with, death, disease, death of a patient, death of a loved one, death of a coworker, death, disease, and loss, and the grief that they don't even really get to process yet because they're in crisis mode. They're in survival mode because they have to be. Right? To keep this all going, they have to absorb all of this right now for us. Okay? So, regardless of how you feel about the lethality of this virus, I just urge you to take a minute to just think about what that is like for them. Regardless of how we feel about it, they are still at risk. They are still putting themselves at risk and coming home to their loved ones and worrying about the risk they're putting their loved ones in, right? This guilt that I hear so much about, which breaks my heart because it's not their fault, right? It's the call of duty in a way. In addition to that, okay, there's the powerlessness. I'm sure you guys have felt it off and on throughout this pandemic, the powerlessness, the helplessness, what do I do and how can I, help myself? How can I help my child? I felt that way from time to time when my kid's having a tantrum because I'm trying to teach him math, right? Like it comes in different ways for us, but for our healthcare workers and our first responders and essential workers, this is constant, or it can be for many of them, because there's a constant trigger, right? There's a constant reminder of what this environment is about for them. So when you think about all of that, and that's just what I can think of myself, right, as far as the risk factors for them and how it impacts them emotionally and mentally, can you imagine what that does to a person over time? So there's cumulative effects of all of this on a day-to-day basis. We cannot underestimate it. And it's actually being predicted that the mental health crisis is going to be the second wave of crisis that we're going to have to contend with after we've dealt with corona, after we've dealt with COVID-19. This is going to be the next thing that we're going to see a wave of, right? We're already seeing it. Suicide rates have increased, substance abuse rates have increased. We're already seeing it. And really, we're just getting started. So this is the dark side. Okay, I promise there's no happy ending, but there are real things that we can also celebrate. Okay, so if you have a frontline worker, healthcare worker, essential worker in your life, please take the time to thank them, like really thank them in a meaningful way. And to just, help them out. Like, hey, can I grab you something? Can I make you breakfast? Can I, grab your mail for you? Whatever it is, right? Because it is so exhausting. The burnout, the exhaustion, the depression rates, and then they don't have time to really deal with it or decompress because they have to go back to work the next day. That kind of like suppression and containing of your feelings all the time can lead to burnout because you're not getting a release, and this is very similar in my opinion to what our soldiers go through when they're in a war zone. That's why when they come home, that's when they have the space and safety to feel their feelings and feel the effects of that. That's when we see all the symptoms, not usually in the war zone, because that's the beauty of our survival mechanism. It kicks in when we need to, but it can only sustain you for so long. So that's what we're worried about with our frontline workers and our essential workers. And I'm not saying I have the solution, but I do know that mental health intervention, early intervention, consistent intervention, post-corona intervention, those are the things that I really believe is what's going to help people, especially our frontline workers, recover from this with the least amount of damage. So, I know sometimes when it doesn't seem like news anymore, right? Because we've been here for almost 3 months and, the commercials are kind of dissipating and maybe, you're not really seeing a whole lot of images on healthcare workers. So it's easy to assume that, maybe it's a non-issue or that you just forget. So this is our contribution to putting it back on the table, putting it back on the agenda, and at the forefront of your minds, because this is truly an issue, a crisis. The United Nations is not going to say that if it's not true. And frontline workers aside, it's that warning applies to us all. So please, if you're experiencing any issues, don't wait till it gets worse. Seek the help of a professional. If your friends aren't cutting it, if your support system ain't cutting it, that's the time to consider a professional. And plus, professionals, therapists, we listen differently. We're not going to listen to you like your friend will. Right? We're listening for themes, for patterns, for unconscious things that maybe is not within your awareness. We listen differently, and that's why it's a different experience. Okay? And transcendtherapyca.com. You can check us out if you live in California and you want to do telehealth. That's all we're offering right now because of the safety issues. So give us a call or email us, transcendtherapy@gmail.com, and we will, we'd be more than happy to help you. And if we can't help you, we can direct you to the right place, okay? So that's the dark side. The bright side is resilience. I don't know about you guys, but I am seeing more individual and community resilience. That's really coming through. What is resilience? I mean, I don't know what the Webster definition is, but to me, resilience is the ability to bounce back, the ability to, recover from things and to have what we call post-traumatic growth, meaning you learn from an unpleasant or terrible situation, and that event actually makes you grow. Instead of it holding you back and hindering you, it actually becomes another additive that can enhance your life. right? So resilience, I'm seeing that a lot. That's the